Okay, hi. So what I've been doing is I got a piece of paper and I basically laid out the entire garden. So I think in pictures. I'm a very visual person. So for me to not get carried away in my seed order and order way more than I even have room for, this visual guides me, and it also helps me check companion planning. So what I've done is I've laid out all of the beds, all of the paths, and I've put in key anchors in my garden, things like quince tree, persimmons, apples, cherries, raspberries, black raspberries, marionberries, goji berries, those sorts of things. So these guys are established, that's what's out there. I've made a list of some of the varietals that I'm interested in. Now, my primary concern when I'm shopping for seeds is the company certified GMO free? Do they do their due diligence to ensure that their seeds are safe? One company that does an excellent job, and they're out of Northern California, so our neighbors to the south, are Baker Creek Seed Company. So I've been to their vault, I've talked to some of their sourcers, and I'm really impressed with them. So what I originally do when I get my seed catalog is I read it cover to cover. So I go through and I read about every single varietal, and with a pen or a little marker, I just make a circle next to it. So then I set it aside, do my map layout, go back, and sometimes I'll have 5 different broccolis chosen. And so what I'm looking for is my second determination, like how much space do I have and where am I going to put broccoli and how many varietals can I really support. The original read through is just the inspiration, like what sounds interesting, so that when I go back to order, I have, a fraction of the varietals to read through. So when I'm going through here, I'm looking at green beans, for instance. I'm looking for excellent taste. I'm looking for, sometimes if the seed is rare or interesting, what kind of rules something out for me is marketability. So when something says it holds up really well or it's a market favorite, that to me means uniformity, probably high yielding, and not that either of these things are bad, but to me as a backyard gardener, I don't necessarily want vegetables that are durable for hanging out at a market all day. I want really delicious, delectable vegetables that I can pick fresh and just make into something immediately. So tomatoes, for example. Tomatoes are more marketable if they're round and uniform in size. So now people are more aware of the different heirloom tomatoes and varieties, so they're willing to try orange tomatoes, yellow tomatoes, purple tomatoes. So the color doesn't matter as much to me, but what does matter is the vitamin content. So some of the characteristics that make tomatoes really fragile and not suitable for market are often the same characteristics in the tomatoes that make them the most delicious. My favorite tomato is the Brandywine. Now the Brandywine they're like the racehorse of tomatoes. They're very finicky, they split, they're fragile, they do not hold up, they don't transport well, they're very thin-skinned, they're usually large, the plants don't produce that much. But what they do produce is an exceptional tomato. So when I see, good for market growers, I don't necessarily think taste. I definitely consider things like that. And it's basically just what appeals to me. So obviously I know I'm kind of a lazy gardener, so if a green bean says to pick when it's the size of a pencil and it gets stringy thereafter, I'm not going to go for that one because I know I'm going to be gone that week and all my green beans are going to be perfect and I'm going to come back with these chewy, stringy, big, overgrown green beans. So I'm going to leave that variety for somebody that's actually a more attentive gardener. Other factors that I consider are varietals that are mentioned in books. Now, Alice Waters is a wonderful, wonderful cookbook author, restaurateur, very inspirational cook for me. And she writes a lot about varietals. I also, when I come across a book like this one, Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream, I remember reading last year when I was making a mint ice cream for my grandmother. I remember reading about a certain kind of mint because I went out and picked mint for my yard and it was good, but it just wasn't the right mint. It wasn't the right flavor. And so I'm looking at her book and she said, after testing different varietals, they finally settled on a cool black peppermint with a strange official name, Robert Mitchum mint. This varietal has a strong sweet peppermint scent, and it also has a high concentration of oils, which are essential to flavor ice cream. So I made a mental note, and this year I'm ordering Robert Mitchum peppermint. So those are the kinds of considerations that I do, and I don't isolate it just to my seed catalog. I will source from several different websites. I'll put a list of a few of my favorites in the text box just below this video so you guys can go on and be inspired. So now what I'm going to do, I've got my list of varietals. I'm going to start with my known companion plants. I know that I have potatoes over here, and I also know that I have never once gotten all the potatoes out. So I'm not going to plant tomatoes over there in that potato bed. However, if I plant a row of alums, leeks, or onions, or shallots in between the potato and the tomatoes, I can put them in the same bed and those tomatoes thrive. Tomato plants that I planted an alum row away from potatoes did better than any of my other tomato plants. I do make mental notes for groupings like that that have succeeded in the past, but I also rotate crops. So if I've planted tomatoes in a bed last year, I won't plant them in there again for 2 more years. So I do a 3-year crop rotation. So I'm just going to start looking at companion planting, looking at my order, and start filling in how many I want and which bed they would be best suited for. All right, my gardening books are a little lacking on companion planting, so the internet isn't. Okay, beans, bush beans. Keep away from fennel, garlic, leek, onion, shallot. Okay, there's nothing there. Potatoes and marigolds repel Mexican bean beetle. Catnip repels flea beetles. So my apple trees, I'm going to do pole beans. Once I establish a bed and a plant, I'm going to go ahead and make an X on my order sheet. Pole beans, runner beans, and just make a little asterisk next to it so I know that that for sure is something I'm going to order. If I do have too many, let's say broccolis, since I've used that example, let's say I have too many broccolis and I don't have enough beds for all of them because they're huge plants, I'll just go ahead and mark them off. And then I generally submit my orders on the internet. If you write down all the order numbers, most of the seed websites will allow you just to input the numbers and save having to go through and scroll through all the pages and find the item that you actually want. So it is nice to just kind of get in the habit of writing the actual order number down. If I see a companion plant, something that's very beneficial, especially for insect repellent, since I'm an organic gardener, that's a very high priority of mine, I'll go ahead and write it down. Wow! And then add that to my list. I think I could do kale here, kale here. Kale is one of those plants that I like to mix all over the garden, broccoli, kale, because it's really susceptible to aphids. And I also like to make sure I have a lot of marigolds near my kale because that helps deter them. So I'm going to be planting peppers here, a tomato here, and maybe some nasturtiums. Everything is pretty much filling up. My list has now gone off the page onto the back, which is not a good sign. Oh, and I haven't done lettuce. I usually try to do maybe 6 varieties. Okay, come back to lettuce. Onions are not compatible with beans and peas. So just about anything else, they're a deterrent for certain pests or maggots. So I end up putting onions everywhere in the garden, like 4 or 5 here, a couple dozen here, and just spreading them out. So I'm just careful not to put them near my beans and peas, which is easy for me. So I'll probably end up ordering quite a few different varieties of onions for that reason. They're a wonderful natural pest repellent. So there's a few places that I still have a little bit of space. So as I write the items in the companion, my companion log, we'll call it, I've been adding them also into the bed map. And so I have an idea of which things are going where without having to stop and revisit this list. Tomatoes. I've got some tomatoes here. Tomato here, tomato here. I might put a tomato here. All right, so it looks like my beds are full. All right, so it's a wrap. I've got my complete list. I've got my companion plants and notes. I have my map filled in completely. Thank you for being here. This is my cook's garden, and the varieties are a big deal for me. It's not just going down to the plant store and buying, 4 tomato starts. I want to know what the acidity levels are. I want to know what the vitamin levels are. I want to know the sugar content. I want to know which ones have a lot of paste and are great for sauces and which ones are better for fresh eating. I don't bring forward all of the varietals that have been successful because I would run out of space and be planting the same thing over and over. So again, I thrive on diversity and I love growing something I've never grown before. Thank you for your interest in my gardening process, my ordering process, and how I choose my seeds. And I'm really excited to do some stuff in the garden this summer and bring you out there with me because it is really a sanctuary. And when it starts to grow and everything starts to come up and just the wildness of it, there's no rows, there's very little order out there, but it just turns into a magical, luscious kind of food. We'll call it a food jungle. So here's the outline for my jungle. I'll see you out there this summer. Thanks for being here and thank you for watching. And I'm sure as the summer progresses, you guys would be interested in seeing how a lot of these things are cooked. Enjoy your day.